A sudden burst of energy fires inside the brain just seconds before death, not silence, not darkness, activity, intense, fast, and unexpected. In some cases, the brain becomes more active than it is during normal life. Signals race. Neurons fire in patterns that look almost organized, almost aware. This is not what most people think happens. For a long time, death was described as a slow, fading process. The heart stops, the brain shuts down, everything goes quiet. But modern research is starting to challenge that idea. In the final moments, the brain may not be fading at all. It may be entering one last powerful state. Some scientists have recorded sudden spikes in brain waves right before death. These spikes are not random noise. They resemble patterns seen during dreaming, memory recall, and even conscious awareness. It looks less like a shutdown and more like a surge. At the same time, many people who come close to death report something strange. They talk about vivid flashes, memories playing all at once, a deep sense of clarity. Some describe calm, others describe something they cannot fully explain. These reports are often dismissed or misunderstood, but when you place them next to real brain data, a new picture begins to form. The brain might be creating a final experience, and no one knows exactly what that experience is. This is where things become unsettling, because if the brain becomes highly active in those last seconds, then the final moment of life might not feel like nothing. It might feel like something intense, something fast, something deeply real. There is another layer to this that most people never think about. The brain runs on oxygen. Every second, it depends on a steady supply to keep neurons alive. When that supply drops, the system begins to fail. But failure does not happen instantly. There is a short window where the brain reacts. During that window, chaos begins. Electrical signals become unstable. Normal patterns break apart. But instead of going silent, the brain can release a storm of activity, a final wave. Some researchers believe this is the brain trying to survive. Others think it is simply the result of systems collapsing at once. Either way, the result is the same, a brief, intense burst of neural energy. And this burst might be the key to understanding what happens right before death. There have been rare cases where doctors monitored brain activity at the exact moment a person died. In one case, a patient showed a sudden increase in gamma waves. These are the same types of waves linked to consciousness, attention, and memory. The brain, in its final seconds, looked active in a way that should not have been possible. This raises a powerful question. Is the brain shutting down, or is it doing something else? There are also animal studies that show a similar pattern. When oxygen levels drop to zero, the brain does not go quiet immediately. Instead, there is a sharp spike in coordinated activity, almost like a final signal, almost like a last attempt to process something. This is not widely known. Most people still believe death is a simple fade to black, but the data suggests something far more complex is happening. Now think about this carefully. If the brain is still active, even briefly, then awareness might still exist in those final moments. Not for long, not in a stable way, but enough to create a final experience, something that feels real from the inside, even if the body is already shutting down. And here is where science reaches its limit. We can measure brain waves, we can track oxygen levels, we can observe patterns, but we cannot step inside the mind of someone in that moment. We cannot know exactly what they feel or see. The experience itself remains hidden. This is the gap between data and consciousness, and it is a gap that even the greatest scientists are still trying to understand. Greene has explored this mystery from a deeper perspective. He points out that understanding the brain is not the same as understanding awareness. You can map every signal and still not explain what it feels like to be conscious. The moment when consciousness ends is not just a biological event. It is one of the biggest unanswered questions in science. So this video is not just about death. It is about the final moments of the human mind. You are going to learn what actually happens inside the brain as it begins to shut down. You will see how scientists discovered the final surge of activity. You will understand why people report strange and powerful experiences near death. And most importantly, you will explore what this all means for consciousness itself, because the truth is far more complex than most people realize. The brain does not simply turn off like a switch. It goes through a process, a rapid sequence of changes, some of them predictable, some of them still unexplained. And hidden inside that process might be the most intense experience the brain ever produces. By the end of this video, you will see death in a completely different way, not as a simple ending, but as a moment filled with activity, mystery, and unanswered questions. If you want to understand what really happens in those final seconds, stay with this until the end. Welcome to the channel. Subscribe now for more deep science and mind-bending discoveries. The moment the body starts shutting down, the first thing that changes is invisible. Oxygen levels begin to fall, quietly, rapidly. The brain, which depends on a constant flow of oxygen, feels this change almost instantly. Brain cells are not built for survival without oxygen. They are among the most sensitive cells in the human body. Even a few seconds of reduced supply starts to affect how they function. Energy production slows down. Chemical balance begins to shift. The system that once worked with perfect precision starts to lose control. At first, the changes are subtle. Signals still travel, thoughts may still form, but something is off. The timing is no longer exact. The coordination begins to slip. It is like a machine that is still running, but no longer in sync. Within seconds, the situation becomes more serious. Neurons rely on oxygen to maintain electrical stability. Without it, they cannot hold their charge properly. This leads to sudden, irregular firing. Signals that were once smooth and organized become scattered. Some areas of the brain grow quiet. Others become unexpectedly active. This imbalance creates confusion inside the system. The brain is trying to function, but the rules are breaking down. Communication between regions becomes distorted. Messages overlap. Some signals never reach their destination. Others repeat again and again without control. At the same time, carbon dioxide levels begin to rise. This changes the acidity of the blood and brain tissue. The environment inside the brain becomes hostile. Enzymes stop working the way they should. Ion channels start to fail. This pushes neurons even further into instability. There is also a sudden release of certain chemicals. Glutamate, a powerful neurotransmitter, floods the spaces between neurons. In normal conditions, it helps with learning and memory. But in excess, it becomes toxic. It overstimulates cells, forcing them to fire uncontrollably. This process is known as excitotoxicity. It sounds complex, but the effect is simple. The brain is being pushed into overdrive while losing the ability to control itself. Activity increases in some areas, but it is no longer meaningful or organized. It is raw, chaotic energy. Blood flow continues to drop. Oxygen becomes even more scarce. Energy reserves are quickly used up. The brain has almost no backup supply. Unlike muscles, it cannot store fuel for later. Once the supply is gone, the system begins to collapse. Yet during this collapse, something strange happens. Not everything shuts down at once. Some regions fail faster than others. The parts responsible for higher thinking may weaken early, but deeper structures linked to basic survival can remain active a little longer. This creates a mismatch. A brain that is partially functioning but no longer unified. This fragmented activity can produce unusual effects. Signals may fire without clear purpose. Patterns may form and break apart in seconds. The brain is no longer operating as a single system. It is breaking into pieces, each reacting in its own way. This is the transition point, from controlled activity to chaos, from stable awareness to something far less predictable. And in the middle of this instability, just before complete failure, the brain does something that scientists are still trying to fully understand. Just when it seems like the brain should be going quiet, the opposite can happen. In several recorded cases, brain activity does not fade smoothly. It spikes, sharp, fast, intense. Electrodes placed on the scalp or directly on the brain have captured this moment. A rapid increase in high-frequency waves appears just before death. These are not weak signals. They are strong, organized, and surprisingly complex. Some of these patterns look familiar. They resemble the same brain waves seen during deep focus, vivid dreaming, and moments of strong awareness. Gamma waves in particular stand out. These are linked to attention, memory processing, and conscious perception. Seeing them at the edge of death is unexpected. It suggests the brain is not simply shutting down. It is doing something active, something coordinated. One study observed a patient whose brain suddenly produced a burst of gamma activity seconds before death. The pattern looked similar to what is seen when a person recalls memories or processes important information. It was not random noise. It had structure. It had rhythm. This has led some scientists to describe the event as a last burst, a final wave of neural firing before the system collapses. But this burst is not just electrical. It is also chemical. As oxygen levels fall and cells become unstable, the brain releases a flood of neurotransmitters. Dopamine levels can rise. Glutamate surges through neural pathways. Endorphins may be released as the body responds to extreme stress. This chemical storm pushes neurons into rapid activity. The effect is powerful. Neurons fire more quickly. Signals spread across regions that are usually tightly controlled. Boundaries between different parts of the brain begin to blur. Information that would normally stay separated starts to mix. This can create unusual experiences. Memory centers may activate at the same time as sensory areas. Emotional regions may fire alongside visual processing zones. The result is a state where thoughts, images, and feelings collide, not in a slow or orderly way, but all at once. There is another detail that makes this moment even more intense. The brain is losing its ability to filter information. Under normal conditions, it selects what matters and ignores the rest. But during this surge, that control weakens. Signals that would normally be suppressed are allowed through. Background noise becomes part of the experience. Internal and external signals can blend together. This creates a state that may feel larger than normal awareness. Faster, brighter, more overwhelming. Some researchers believe this could explain why certain people report extremely vivid experiences near death. Not just memories, but entire sequences that feel real and detailed. The brain, in its final moments, may be processing information at a level that feels heightened, even as it is breaking down. There is also evidence from animal studies that supports this idea. When oxygen is suddenly removed, the brain shows a brief period of increased synchronization. Neurons fire together in patterns that suggest coordinated activity. It is short but intense. This synchronization may be the key. It suggests the brain is not only active but temporarily unified in a powerful way, a final alignment before collapse. But this state does not last long. The same conditions that create the surge are also destroying the system. Energy is running out. Cells are under extreme stress. The chemical balance is collapsing. The brain is pushing itself beyond its limits. And as this surge reaches its peak, something even stranger begins to unfold. As this surge unfolds, many people who come close to death report something striking. They see a bright light, not a vague glow, but a clear, intense source. Some describe it as distant. Others say it feels close, almost pulling them forward. Along with it comes a narrowing of vision. The edges fade. The center sharpens. Everything outside that central point begins to disappear. This is often described as tunnel vision. There is a physical reason behind it. The visual cortex located at the back of the brain is extremely sensitive to oxygen loss. When oxygen levels drop, this region does not shut down evenly. Cells at the outer edges fail first. The center remains active a little longer. As a result, the field of vision appears to shrink inward. Darkness forms around the edges. Light remains in the middle. The brain interprets this pattern as a tunnel. At the same time, the intensity of light can increase. This is not because the outside world has changed, but because the brain is processing signals in a distorted way. Neurons begin firing irregularly. Some become overactive. This can amplify brightness, turning normal signals into something overwhelming. But vision is only part of the experience. Many people report something even more complex. A rapid sequence of memories. Moments from life appear suddenly. Childhood scenes, faces, places, events long forgotten. These memories do not come slowly. They arrive all at once, layered and overlapping. It feels like a flood. There is a scientific explanation for this as well. The hippocampus, a region deep inside the brain, plays a key role in memory. During extreme stress, it can become highly active. Combined with the surge of neurotransmitters, this can trigger widespread memory recall. The brain may begin accessing stored information at high speed. It is not a calm reflection. It is fast, intense, uncontrolled. Some researchers believe this is the brain attempting to process its entire stored experience in a final moment. Not in a logical order, but in fragments. Pieces of a lifetime appearing in seconds. Emotional centers are also involved. The amygdala, which processes fear and strong feelings, becomes active during stress. This can add emotional weight to the memories. Joy, regret, fear, and peace can all appear together. The experience becomes deeply personal and powerful. There is another important detail. The brain, even in this unstable state, is still trying to make sense of what is happening. It searches for patterns. It tries to organize the chaos. When signals become disordered, the brain fills in the gaps. It creates structure where none exists. This is something it does all the time, even in normal life. But in this extreme state, the effect is amplified. This can lead to experiences that feel structured and meaningful. A sense of movement, a sense of transition, even a sense of leaving one state and entering another. All of this feels real, because for the brain, it is real. The same regions that create everyday perception are still active. They are just operating under extreme conditions. The signals may be distorted, but the experience they produce is vivid and convincing. This is why near-death experiences are often described with such clarity. They are not dreams in the usual sense. They are generated by a brain that is still functioning, even as it begins to fail. And as these experiences intensify, another layer begins to emerge, driven not just by electrical signals, but by a powerful chemical storm inside the brain. Beneath the electrical chaos, another process begins to take over, a chemical storm. As the brain struggles to survive, it releases a surge of powerful substances. These chemicals move fast. They spread across neural pathways. They change how signals are sent and how reality is perceived. One of the first changes involves dopamine. Dopamine is often linked to reward and motivation. Under normal conditions, It rises during moments of pleasure or achievement, but in extreme stress, the brain can release it in large amounts. This sudden increase can alter perception. It can make experiences feel more intense, more meaningful, almost amplified. At the same time, endorphins begin to rise. Endorphins are natural painkillers. The body produces them to reduce suffering. In dangerous situations, they help block pain and create a sense of calm. During the final moments, this release can become unusually strong. Physical discomfort may fade, fear may soften. A strange sense of peace can appear, even as the body is shutting down. This combination is unusual. On one side, the brain is under extreme stress. Signals are breaking apart, systems are failing. On the other side, chemicals are creating calm, even comfort. The result is a mix of opposing states. Fear and peace can exist at the same time. There is another theory that adds a deeper layer to this. Some scientists suggest the brain may release compounds similar to DMT. DMT is a powerful molecule known for producing intense, dreamlike experiences. It can create vivid imagery, strong emotions, and a sense of leaving normal reality. Small amounts of DMT-like substances have been found in the brain, though their exact role is still unclear. In animal studies, there are hints that levels of such compounds may rise during extreme stress or near death. This has led to the idea that the brain might produce its own altered state in the final moments, not as a random effect, but as part of a deeper biological response. This idea remains debated. There is no final proof, but the possibility is enough to raise important questions, because if such compounds are released, they could help explain why some near-death experiences feel so vivid and structured. The brain may not just be reacting, it may be creating. There is also a protective side to all of this. When the body faces extreme trauma, the brain tries to reduce damage. It attempts to stabilize the system. It tries to protect the mind from overwhelming stress. The release of calming chemicals may be part of that effort, a way to soften the impact, a way to ease the transition. This can create a sense of detachment. Some people describe feeling separated from their body, not in a physical sense, but in awareness. Pain feels distant. Time feels distorted. Emotions become muted or strangely balanced. It is as if the brain is pulling back from the intensity, even while everything else is collapsing. But this state is unstable. The same chemicals that create calm can also distort perception. The same processes that protect can also confuse. Signals continue to break down. Energy continues to fall. The brain is still losing its ability to maintain order. The storm cannot last. As these chemicals surge and fade, the system moves closer to its final limit, where even this fragile balance begins to collapse. As the chemical storm begins to lose strength, a deeper change takes over. Oxygen is almost gone. At this point, brain cells reach a limit they cannot escape. Neurons depend on a constant supply of oxygen to produce energy. Without it, their internal systems begin to break down at a fundamental level. The tiny pumps that control electrical charge stop working. Ion balances collapse. The cell membrane can no longer maintain stability. This is not a slow decline anymore. It is a tipping point. One by one, neurons begin to fail permanently. Not all at once, not in perfect order. Some regions shut down faster than others. Areas that handle complex thinking are often the first to go. Reasoning weakens. Language fades. The sense of control disappears. Deeper parts of the brain last a little longer. These regions are tied to basic functions: breathing, heart rhythm, primitive responses. But even they cannot survive without oxygen for long. Their activity becomes weaker with every passing second. After the intense surge of activity, there is a sharp drop. Electrical signals that once spiked begin to fall rapidly. The patterns lose their structure. The coordination seen moments earlier disappears. Instead of organized waves, there is scattered, fading noise. Then even that begins to vanish. This drop can be sudden. In some recordings, brain activity falls off almost like a cliff. Within seconds, signals that once filled the screen shrink to near silence. The brain, which once carried billions of active connections, starts to go quiet. But the process is not perfectly clean. There can be brief, isolated bursts. Small pockets of activity flicker and then fade. It is like watching lights go out in a city, one district at a time. Some areas go dark early, others hold on for a few moments longer. During this phase, conscious awareness begins to slip away. Thoughts cannot form clearly. Sensory input no longer makes sense. The sense of self starts to dissolve. There is no stable platform for awareness to exist. The systems that create perception, memory, and identity are no longer connected in a meaningful way. Time itself may feel distorted. Without proper brain function, the ability to track time breaks down. A moment may feel stretched or compressed. There is no reliable way to measure it from the inside. The experience, if it is still present, becomes fragmented. Then comes the most difficult part to understand: the exact moment when consciousness disappears. Science can measure electrical activity. It can detect when neurons stop firing. It can observe when brain regions shut down, but none of these measurements can fully capture awareness itself. There is no clear signal that marks the instant when experience ends. It is not like a switch turning off. It is more like a fading process that reaches a point where awareness can no longer continue. But where that point lies is still unknown. It may happen during the final bursts of activity. It may occur during the rapid decline. There is no single answer. This uncertainty is one of the deepest mysteries in neuroscience. Even when the brain appears silent, the question remains, was there a final moment of awareness just before that silence? And if so, what was it like? As the last traces of electrical activity disappear, the brain reaches complete shutdown, leaving behind a question that science still cannot fully answer. Even with all this data, one question remains untouched. Science can track the brain with precision. It can measure electrical signals down to milliseconds. It can map which regions are active and which are silent. It can show the exact moment when activity begins to collapse, but none of this reveals the most important part: the experience itself. There is a difference between observing the brain and understanding what it feels like from the inside. A scan can show patterns. It can show spikes and drops, but it cannot tell if there is still awareness during those final seconds. It cannot describe the quality of that awareness or if it exists at all. This is the gap between objective data and subjective experience, and it is still unsolved. There is another layer of uncertainty that makes this even more complex. Time as the brain experiences it is not fixed. It depends on neural activity. When the brain is stable, time feels steady, but when the system is disrupted, time can stretch or collapse. In extreme conditions, a few seconds can feel much longer, or they may feel like nothing at all. This raises a difficult question. The final moments of brain activity may last only seconds in the outside world. But from the inside, if awareness is still present, those seconds could feel very different. There is no reliable way to measure that. There is no way to compare internal time to external time in that state. So even if the brain shuts down quickly, the experience of that shutdown remains unknown. Another assumption people often make is that consciousness ends the moment brain activity stops. It seems logical. No activity means no awareness. But this idea may be too simple. Consciousness may not operate like a switch. It may not turn off at a single point. Instead, it could fade. It could fragment. It could dissolve in ways that are not directly visible in brain data. There may not be a clear boundary where awareness exists one moment and disappears the next. The transition could be gradual, even if it happens quickly. This is where modern neuroscience begins to reach its limits, and where deeper questions begin. Greene has argued that understanding consciousness may require more than just studying the brain. Physics can describe matter and energy. Biology can explain how cells function. But awareness itself may not fit neatly into these categories. It is something we experience directly, yet cannot fully explain. The brain produces signals. It processes information. It creates patterns. But how those patterns become a lived experience is still unknown. This problem remains one of the hardest in science. Some researchers call it the hard problem of consciousness. And it becomes even more mysterious at the edge of death. If the brain activity ends, does awareness end at the exact same moment? Or is there a final phase that cannot be measured? There is no clear answer. No instrument can detect the presence or absence of experience directly. This means that even when the brain goes silent, a deeper question remains open, not about signals or cells, but about awareness itself. And that question does not end with the data. Death is not a simple fade into silence. It may be the opposite, a brief storm, a final surge of activity inside the most complex system in the known universe. In those last moments, the brain does not always go quietly. It fights, it fires, it releases energy, chemicals, and signals in ways that are still not fully understood. There may be flashes of memory, sudden clarity, a strange sense of calm mixed with chaos, not darkness, but intensity. Science has begun to uncover pieces of this process. We can see the spikes, we can measure the circuit of activity, we can track how oxygen loss affects the brain. But the most important part remains hidden, the experience itself, the feeling of that final moment. No machine can capture that, no study can fully explain it. The line between life and death is not as simple as it once seemed. It is not just a switch turning off, it is a transition, fast, complex, mysterious, and possibly filled with one last powerful experience created by the brain itself. That is what makes it so unsettling and so fascinating, because even at the very end, the brain may still be active in ways that feel real from the inside. Even as everything else is shutting down, something may still be happening, something we cannot see, something we cannot measure, something we do not yet understand. And that leaves us with one final truth. The last second of the mind remains one of the greatest mysteries in science, not because we know nothing, but because what we know only opens deeper questions. If this made you think in a new way, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep science and mind-bending ideas that challenge what we think we know about reality.